Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. How can you become more confident? How can you avoid falling into the trap of the imposter syndrome? Today's guest, Lisa Bilyeu, is the co-founder of the billion-dollar company Quest Nutrition and co-founder and president of Impact Theory. She's also the host of Women of Impact, a show featuring women who have overcome incredible hardship to achieve massive success. In her new book, Radical Confidence, Lisa shares the incredible story of how she went from a stay-at-home housewife to co-founder of a billion-dollar company and inspires us all to become the heroes of our own lives. In our conversation today, we talk about how to face your insecurities, boost your confidence, and live the life of your dreams. This is a fun one. Here's my conversation with Lisa Bilyeu. All right, Lisa, what a treat to have you on. This is fun. You know, your new book, Radical Confidence, it's out now. Get me inside of Radical Confidence, right? Like, what does it mean, to you?
So radical confidence really came about when people were asking me, how did I go from being stuck 8 years, not having the life I really wanted, to then making the change, building multiple companies, and now, where people see me today. And I kept getting asked, where's the confidence from? I'm like, oh my God, you should hear how negative my mindset is. You should hear how scared I am to do everything you see me do. And so when I would pause, I'm like, why do people think I'm confident? Because in my head, I am not at all. And what I realized was they saw radical confidence, which to me means being scared, being afraid, actually also being inadequate to do the things you're about to do, but still doing it anyway. Now, the part of that is you need a plan in order to do it. It's not just blindly saying, oh, feel the fear and do it. It actually is, okay, let's pause. I just read a quote recently, which I loved, which was, a goal without a plan is just a dream. So the whole point is to create a plan so that whenever you feel insecure, inadequate, you feel the fear, you can have a plan to keep following. And so that's, to me, what radical confidence is all about. That's what the book is about, the 10, no BS steps. Because when you find that fear, when you find that anxiety come up, how on earth do you keep moving forward? It isn't confidence. Confidence is the byproduct of taking action. Confidence is the tool sometimes that we want to get to the end result.
I mean, what you're talking about is creating a process, leading into that process and executing against it. But, I always say, you can't think your way into confidence, right? I mean, you have to do it. I mean, you have to go do things. That's how we get what you've done. And that's at some level, I would imagine, strengthen your confidence muscle over time, has it not?
Absolutely. So because I used to allow how I felt about myself to get in the way of me taking action, that to me became the first step. It's like, how on earth do you get started when, let's say, you've lived years and years of the life that you have habits that you necessarily don't even realize you have. You're making small little choices that are not moving you towards the thing you really want in life. And it's what I call in the book, I was in purgatory of the mundane, which means that my life was just mundane enough, Molly. And I never made a change because I just thought, I never hit rock bottom. And I don't know about you, but how many people have you interviewed where their successes, the amazing accomplishments all come from the fact that they've hit rock bottom and it jolts them into action? But what about people that was like me, where I was like, my life is just fine. It's not exciting. I try to fill my days up, but it's not bad, but it's not amazing. And so that's what I call purgatory of the mundane. And how do you break out of that? How do you keep moving forward when you don't have the confidence? Because to your point is that the confidence gets built along the way. But that moment of activating, taking action, I think is so difficult for so many of us because we've got all these years of conditioning and training and choice making and a belief system that all says that we are not enough, that says, who on earth do you think you are to go after that dream? All these things were exactly what I battled.
And so what would you say is the, one or two or three, I mean, and I love your book, by the way, and I love just the balls of your book, right? I mean, it's just, what would you say is the one or two things that you would say to somebody that's listening and that's going, man, I feel like that. I'm on cruise control, right? I'm just kind of going through the motions. Things are okay. I'm not at rock bottom, but I'm not elated every morning when I wake up. What do they do first?
Yeah, so that's great because if they're asking, I wish I had the confidence, right? Like I hear that a lot. I wish I had the confidence to do what? That's it. You just have to answer that question. You want confidence to do what? Because we so focus on the confidence part, which to me is the feeling good about yourself, right? But ultimately, it's like, but what is that end goal? You want confidence so you can tell maybe your parents that you no longer want to study biochemistry and you actually want to be a stand-up comedian, right? People are just like, that is so crippling to tell your parents when they're paying for it, especially if you come from a cultural background. There's so much that's tied up in that. So even in just asking the question, you don't necessarily want the confidence. What you actually want is to tell your parents this because you want to change careers. Then that's your end goal. And now you've got your end goal, you can create a stepping stone plan in order to achieve that. And what you'll see is in taking action, over time, you become more competent. And as you become more competent, that's where the confidence comes from. But you have to get started in order to get there.
Well, I love how you talk about that people talk about confidence as the goal and that we want to be confident, but we're thinking about that wrong because confidence isn't the end goal. So we have to ask ourselves what we want, right?
Exactly. It's like how many times have people said like, I really want to be happy. Now, if I asked you, okay, well, what do you want to be happy in? It wouldn't be weird, right? You'd be like, of course, yeah, I have to identify what I want to be happy in. But we don't do that with confidence. You want to be confident. Okay, confident in what? And you're like, I realize now what I was saying is I want to feel great about myself when I start this new thing. I don't want to face my fear. I want to feel great so that I succeed. Why do you want to succeed? Maybe because you fear failing. Well, why do you fear failing? Maybe failing, you think it says something about you. Maybe you take that as a reflection of you are a failure, right? And so piecing apart what that fear is, what it's telling you, why it's telling you it. And then even just asking yourself, okay, maybe this is true right now. Like for me, I wanted to get on stage. That was the thing. It was like, in fact, it's the opposite. I didn't want to get on stage public speaking because I was like, why would anyone do it? It looks terrifying. And that isn't the like my ego, right? The ego comes in. It was like, well, Lisa, you're going to mess up. Well, Lisa, you're going to be no good. And so what I realized in those moments was, my ego is trying to protect me. My ego is trying to say, Lisa, you haven't done it before. You're going to fall on your face. And if you fall on your face, you're going to embarrass yourself. And imagine you embarrass yourself. Now imagine you're going to hold on to that for the rest of your life, right? That's the ego in the ear. But now if I go, I've just said, what was the goal of your confidence? For me, it was impact. And so with no judgment, I just looked at what was holding me back, the ego, the fear. And then I looked at my goal. And now I just said, which one is more important to me? Now, this isn't what's more important to everyone else. This is what is more important to me because I have to live with my emotions. I have to live with how I feel about myself. And so if I decided, you know what, I don't want a life that creates anxiety and thinking about going on stage creates anxiety, great. Now I've just decided feeling better about myself on the day-to-day is more important than my goal. And now the most beautiful thing about all of this is in 1 year, in 2 years, in 5 years, if you haven't reached your goal, you don't beat yourself up because you go, I made a decision back then that feeling better about myself was better than my goal. So why am I not at my goal here? Because I decided I wanted to feel better about myself on a day-to-day. And now it just removes the judgment of, I can't believe I didn't do that. You should have done it. Like all the shoulds and woulds and could haves that just start breaking us down. That's why that kind of like assessment really helped me. And then if I decided it was impact, which it was, then I came with a game plan of, okay, Lisa, now you feel the fear. How on earth are you going to get on stage? And that became then the next part of the book in one of the chapters where I just break down. I was really scared, and so I did this. I was petrified, and so I did this. The negative voice was telling me this, and so I said this. And it becomes these little bit of stepping stones where people now see me as being confident. And I'm just like, no. I just took every stepping stone I needed to. Absolutely scared, but I made the decision. My goal was more important.
And it gave you that vision, that purpose at some level. And I always talk about how, when I was a sports agent, I saw all the little moments with all my athletes and coaches when they were scared to death. They're scared when they're standing over a putt to win their first tour event. They're scared when they're draining free throws to win championship games. They're scared. But the best ones, they step into that, feel all of that fear, right? And keep going. And that's what you're describing at some level that you did. You stepped into these little moments, right? With a pit in your stomach day after day after day. And that's where that confidence gets strengthened, gets built.
It's interesting because a lot of people have actually, as I start to talk, a lot of people go back to the sports thing because, I talk about I have my Wonder Woman necklace and I wear this all the time so that if I'm on stage or if I'm doing an interview, I every so often see my reflection. And so what I've done with this necklace is over time, I've deliberately cultivated what it means to me. And so in order to go on stage, I was so fearful. So I said, what are all the subliminal messages I can give myself in order to break my unhealthy thought pattern that I have, which is, who the hell do you think you are going on stage? So it's I have to keep breaking this thought pattern. So what can I do? And I literally was out of helplessness, or lostness, I was what can I do? And it was the necklace. And a lot of people do associate that with sports, athletes where they have either a lucky, I don't call it my lucky charm, but these things that allow you to keep leaning into it when the pressure is really on. And so for me, I just started putting this on and I would put it on. And every time I would put it on, I'm yeah, you're a badass like Wonder Woman. Yeah, you're a badass like Wonder Woman. And I kept doing it. Now, we all know repetition creates habit. So what I ended up doing is over time, I ended up giving meaning to this necklace. So now when I put it on, when I'm doing a podcast with you, Molly, when I'm going on stage, I just put this on. And automatically now I've already rewired my brain to tell myself that I'm a badass like Wonder Woman. But that's the sort of thing that I lean into because I need a game plan in order to keep me moving forward.
It's all about our self-talk, isn't it? I mean, at some level, what you're saying is we tell ourselves stories, right? The stories can keep us stuck. The stories can take us where we want to go, but we've got to be intentional about shifting the stories because we have something like 50,000 thoughts a day and 90% of them are automated and a lot of them can be negative. And so if we're not intentional, right, we can shift. You open the book, right, by sharing your own story, right? And you touched on it a little bit, where you were totally detached from your hopes and dreams. And then you talk briefly about what happened, but just for everyone to know, because you talk about how you were a housewife for sort of 8 years and you sort of claimed, look, I gave up on my own dreams and sort of this filmmaking journey that you've unlocked. So to get me inside of that a little bit more deeply.
Thank you. Yeah, because this is one of those moments where if I can just articulate it perfectly to whoever is listening, I really hope it's a breakthrough. Because for me, what happened was I grew up, had these big wild dreams of making movies. I meet my husband. He has the same dreams. He's American. So we move, I moved to LA and we go, cool, let's work in movies. Now, our first experiences, both of us hated it. It was you have the dream, and then you're oh, this isn't what I thought it would be. So for instance, I go on a movie set and I have an actor throw a matchbox at me out of anger one day. And I was well, this isn't the dream that I really thought I was going to have. And so me and my husband, back then, it was 2002, just naivety sunk in. And we're oh, well, let's just make our own money and we can then finance our own films. And now you don't have other people being disrespectful to you. So we was okay, we can do this for a year and a half. And we kind of made an agreement to my husband, you're going to go out and make the money. And we just read an article with Steve Jobs because I'm always trying to say, okay, whatever I'm trying to do, look at the best in the business. Look at how they show up every day. Try and replicate it and then tweak and adjust according to who you are. But in order, if you're lost, right, you don't know what to do, having a foundation of someone who's already been there can be incredible. So we looked at Steve Jobs and we said, how does he live his life? And what we realized is that he had eloquently said that you can only make a certain amount of actual decisions with utter clarity in one day. And so he would eliminate all the meaningless decisions, like what color shirt you wear, which is why you always saw Steve Jobs in black and jeans, because he was like, I'm not wasting even a moment of my brain power deciding on my clothes. So me and my husband sit there and we're like, okay, this is actually a great strategy. I'll stay at home, babe, for a year and a half. I'll decide everything outside of business, from I'll do the bills, the food, clothes, cooking, everything. You go out and make the money, and in a year we'll make enough money, we'll make movies. And so every day I was telling myself we're doing it for the greater good. Even though I hated what I was doing, I'd never dreamt of being a housewife. I'd never dreamt of being, the cook and the cleaner. I had always had these big dreams. But every day I started to tell myself it's for the greater good, Lisa, for the greater good. And so for the first year, I definitely thought it was sacrifice that I was making for a bigger picture. How many of us do that, where we make sacrifices for something else or for someone else because we tell ourselves it's not going to be forever? Now, that moment ended up being, as I look back now, because I was in purgatory of the mundane, because my life wasn't hitting rock bottom, every day for about a year and a half, I was using gratitude in order to keep me going. So I was like, okay, Lisa, you don't love your life. You're letting go of, like, it doesn't feel like you're working on your dreams right now, but don't worry, you're doing it for the greater good, and be actually grateful for what you have. You don't have to work. You have a roof over your head and you have a husband that loves you. So that kept me going. That kept me on this path of like, it's just for a year. Now, what happens is our mindset starts to lean into something. It starts to self-soothe. When you're feeling that anxiety or that whisper where you're like, is this really my life? Is this really what I wanted? What I was doing is I was shutting this voice down, this quiet whisper, with gratitude. So something that had become this amazing tool for me in the first year and a half ended up being actually the thing that I think definitely kept me in purgatory of the mundane.
Interesting.
Right? Because what I was saying was, after year 2, after year 3, I was saying, well, Lisa, how ungrateful are you to ask for more when you have a roof over your head, when you have a husband that loves you? And so this gratitude started to keep me there, because I was saying, how ungrateful are you, Lisa? You want more, and you've got a husband. You know how many people would die for a husband that loves you as much as you do, right? And that gratitude that used to help me kept me stuck. And because of that, I was making small choices every single day for those 8 years that kept me dismissing my unhappiness. It kept me where I was. And this isn't my husband, right? I wasn't even telling him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you get into the cycle and the pattern. And because I was brought up as a Greek Orthodox woman, I was told when I was a kid that I would end up being a supportive wife and mother. So when it happened, you can understand how all this conditioning from being a child, from this mindset of using gratitude, from this idea of doing it for the greater good, kept me in a life for 8 years that I started to realize wasn't mine.
What finally allowed you to sort of break through from this? Obviously, this was...
Yeah, look, and this is the thing where I think everyone what was the lightning moment? We all want to know, right? Because if we know the lightning moment, then what does that do to us? It actually allows us to sit there and just wait again, right? And now what you're doing is you're getting yourself stuck again.
Yeah.
And what happened for me is there was no lightning moment. It was after 8 years, we were profoundly unhappy. I was seeing my husband just chase money. We'd been doing it for 8 years. And every single day, I started to ask myself the question of what were we doing this for? We had done it initially to go towards our dream. And actually what it had done is actually handcuffed us to the money and not moving towards the dream. So one day it was just like, babe, like, I said to my husband, it wasn't even about me. It was about our relationship. I was like, it's now getting to the point where it is damaging our relationship. And that was kind of the fine line. Like that was the line I was no longer willing to cross. It's interesting how I never thought about myself as the individual, like having a line to cross, but I did when it came to our relationship. And so I just said, I don't care how much money, at that time, we'd built a couple of $1 million in equity in a tech company. So for 8 years, my husband worked really hard. We'd built a couple of $1 million in equity. And I was like, I don't care. Like, I don't care. I just need us to have a life of fulfillment. And so in that decision, he went to quit to his business partners. They revealed they were unhappy. And so what they did is they sat there and said, okay, if we're going to continue to start a business or put this much time and effort into it, we need to do something that's no longer predicated on money. It has to be predicated on passion and a desire and a mission. And so they came up with the idea that it was going to be a protein bar, because my husband and my family have suffered a lot from health. My mum went from being anorexic to morbidly obese growing up. And so the health element was something that we could fight for way more than you could fight for money. Now, in that, I offered, as the good Greek wife, because that was my identity at that point, because I'd built that identity for 8 years. I said to my husband, babe, how can I help? I was like, as long as you're happy, how can I help? And so he was like, oh, well, if you don't mind, just ship a couple of bars from my living room floor, measure ingredients when we need you to, and we'll rent a kitchen and we'll all come with rolling pins and knives and we'll just hand make these bars by hand. So I was like, okay, great, whatever you need. Now, because they were all running the tech company and trying to exit that, so we could make Quest a full-time company. In that, everyone was turning to me on like, oh, well, Lisa's free. Oh, well, Lisa, you just ship this. Oh, well, Lisa, you know how to do it. Now, I didn't expect Quest to grow at 57,000%.
Hi there, it's Molly. I've got some exciting news to share. I'm thrilled to announce I've launched my first ever on-demand course, Up Your Game. Unlock the drive to fuel next level success. Have the past few years left you burned out and stretched thin? Like, despite your success, you're capable of more. Maybe you've lost your purpose and that inner fire to pursue your dreams. If so, you are not alone. So many of us have been there. As a top sports agent for 15 years, representing and working with the best of the best, I've seen and helped countless people unlock their drive to accomplish great things and finally live out their dreams. That's why I've crafted a brand new on-demand course to help you unlock your potential to fuel next level success. In my new course, Up Your Game, I share the critical 8 keys that you absolutely must use to get unstuck and to finally realize your fullest potential. This course, it's not inspirational fluff. It gives you action guides so that you can apply it to your life and take action right now. So are you ready to up your game? Sign up for my new course today at mollyfletcher.com/course. That's mollyfletcher.com/course. I can't wait for this course to change your life in incredible ways. Check it out. You were doing something you were passionate about and putting out a good product.
Well, originally, no. So here's the thing. Because I was so inadequate, I was so insecure. I'd been a housewife for 8 years. I knew how to cook, feed my husband, do it, clean a house and, be great at laundry and take care of my 2 puppies. So in that process, our house was up for collateral. So if Quest went down, we lost our house. And so every step, as we started to go, and just to give people a perspective of what 57,000% means, it means you go from 0 to $1 billion in 5 years. So that's how quickly we grew. We were announced after the first 3 years, the second fastest growing company in North America. So just to kind of give people the understanding of how quickly that actually looks like. So on day 1, I'm shipping 10 bars out of my living room floor, right? In week 2, I'm like, going, oh my God, I have to take a garbage bag now. And now it doesn't fit in the mailbox. I actually have to take it to the post office. And now it's standing in line for an hour at the post office saying, I can't believe I have to stand in line for an hour. What are the things that I can do in order to expedite? I didn't know what I was doing. I was just looking at a problem and not allowing the obstacle to stop me. Because every time I faced the obstacle, I had the choice of going, what's more important, your ego or your goals? The ego says you have no idea how to use this shipping software, which was true. I was looking at the shipping software and I was getting trained, Molly, just to give you an idea how bad I was. One of Tom's business partners is training me on this software. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm petrified. I'm like, I'm not tech. I have no idea what I'm doing. And so I'm sitting there with my little notepad. And in that moment, I'm like, okay, I can either learn this or I can run screaming. Run screaming means it doesn't get done. Run screaming means that if it doesn't get done, you lose your house. So you can imagine in those moments of motivation of how do I figure this out, you have a strong why. Now, it's a fear-based strong why, so I don't recommend it, but I will tell you how that pivoted into a mission-based why. So that fear-based is what propelled me. Every time I was saying to myself, I don't know how, you have to figure it out. So like this shipping software, I'm like, I don't freaking know what I'm doing. So I'm sitting there, Molly, with my pen and my notepad. And the guy's like, all right, so you switch the computer on. I'm like, wait. What did you press? And he's like, the on button? I'm like, okay, just making sure because this is a PC and I'm not used to a PC. And so I just wanted to know what a PC does, right? And then you go to this. Well, hang on a minute. Did you do Safari or did you do Chrome? Because does it make a difference? That's how detailed I got. But that's how you go from not knowing something, being fearful of it, and doing it anyway. And what ended up happening was I figured it out. I trained myself. As we grew, I hired one employee. I have no idea how to be a boss. Okay, figure things out. What if you motivate them with like, okay, and you got to do it by this time. Okay, let's face it, shouting at someone doesn't work. Note to self, shouting at your employee doesn't work. Okay, what if I buy them a cup of coffee afterwards? Does that work? And in this process, like I'm saying, there wasn't one lightning strike moment. There wasn't like, oh my God, now I'm made for this. This is, oh my God, I am fearful all the way. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm not equipped for this. I don't have the skill set. But I must keep marching forward. And that means asking a lot of questions, being honest with where you are in your skill set, being humble and not thinking you have to know everything, but absolutely believing in yourself that if you keep moving forward, if you keep asking the questions, if you keep researching, that eventually you can get there.
I mean, you are building a plane and flying it at the same time, as people say,
exactly.
like literally. But I mean, you probably learned so much about yourself inside of that journey. What were some of the things that you learned about you as you navigated learning the software, as you stood in line at the post office, right? As you connected more deeply to a deeper purpose? What were some of the things that came up for you that now you look back at and go, man, that helped me be a better me now?
Yeah, oh God, so much. But I think the big key ones were I was so scared to fail because I thought that meant I was a failure. And being teased and bullied as a kid about my looks and being mildly dyslexic and getting my B's and my D's, mixed up and being put in a special class because of the way I held my pen. Like the last thing I wanted was to do anything that would cause failure that made me feel worse about myself. And that is now what I call that was my kryptonite. And so as an adult, as I went through this transition, I realized, failure does say something about you, but not what you think. Failure doesn't mean that you are a failure. Failure means that you actually care about your life and you're trying something new in order to give yourself the life you want. And with that pivot of a mindset alone, now says every time you fall, every time you have that failure, you can give yourself the pat on the back that you showed up and tried. And then the last piece of failure that was so powerful to me was one of the moments at Quest, really, really early days. And we had this big malfunction with one of our products. So one of our guys, very early, he comes in and he looks horrified. He's like, I'm so sorry, we've just messed up a batch. Now in startups, $5,000 is everything.
Sure.
And so we're like, I was freaking out. I was like, oh my God, the company's gone, I've lost my house. The company's gone broke. Like, what does this mean about us as a company? We've completely failed. And my husband is very cool. So he's like, babe, before you panic, let's just go and see what we've got. So the guy starts explaining. He was making the peanut butter batch of bars. And he's like, I put in the peanut butter flour. I put in the peanut butter. I put in the protein powder. And he's like, I accidentally grabbed the mixed berry flavoring of the next batch I was going to make. And he's like, I'm so sorry. So my husband's like, look, before we panic, let's just try it. So we're kind of like holding our breath. Everyone's trying this crumble that just looks like it's all wrong. And all of a sudden, someone turns around and says, it kind of tastes like PB&J. Lightning bulb moment. We wrapped them in silver foil, in like nondescript wrapping paper. We plastered it on Facebook. We say, hey, we've got a prototype, only 200 bars because we only had made a small batch. We're like, who wants to try it? Before you know it, Molly, it sold out in like a couple of hours. Then like a few days later, everyone's like on Facebook going, oh my God, this is the best flavor. All the people that didn't get to buy that flavor had now major FOMO because everyone's like, wait, what? What do you mean they sold, there's a PB&J bar? What the hell? And now you can imagine just the demand. So within like 2 or 3 weeks, we got the design made, we got the wrappers made. We then immediately officially put them up for sale. And what ended up happening was that became our number 1 selling protein bar on the market at the time.
Wow.
And so seeing a failure as the best opportunity was one of the biggest lessons that now allows me to every single time go, oh, you're fearful. Why are you fearful? Because you're going to fail. Amazing. Because if you fail, you're going to be more powerful for it.
Mm-hmm. Failure to me is outstanding. And I think we live in a society where we have a low failure tolerance, right? People take 1,000 pictures of themselves and they post the one good one. So everybody thinks that their world is a certain way and it's not. And they fail and they struggle and they have challenges. And we just need to recognize, and I think it's so important for young people today to know that failure is outstanding. It's when we grow. It's when we learn. It's when we build and create best-selling bars, right? Like PB&J. And that is one of my favorites. So I love how you talk about becoming your own hero. And becoming your own hero in your life, right? You say, which I love. How did that play out in your life, Lisa?
This was a lightning bolt moment. In fact, if we want to talk about lightning bolt moments, I had suffered from a lot of health issues. So growing up, I had had a very unhealthy relationship with food. I had thought that staying as skinny as possible meant that that's where boys would like you. And because I was very insecure, because I was bullied, I definitely had an unhealthy relationship with food. So I was cutting out carbs and fat and things like that. Now, what I didn't know at the time was 70% of your immune system is carried in your gut. And so what I was doing is I was holding back from the nutrients. I was getting sick. The more I was getting sick, the more I was taking antibiotics. The more antibiotics I was taking, the sicker I was getting. You do that for 10 to 15 years, 3-4 times a year, 5 times a year. It got to the point where my gut literally on day of our celebration, you can't write this. I'm telling you can't write it. On the day of our celebration, Quest just becomes $1 billion company. Our dreams come true. We buy the house we were driving by as motivation in our poor days. It comes true. I've got the bottle of champagne in my hand. We're actually celebrating. I take a swig and my gut erupts on that day, on that moment. So you want to talk about, if you believe in a higher spirit, I don't know, but it's like, you want to talk about someone saying, hey, success doesn't buy you happiness. I got slapped in the face with that one, Molly.
You ain't kidding. Yes.
And so in that moment, my gut erupted. For over a year, I found it very hard to eat. I was 20 pounds lighter than you see me now. My hair was falling out. My nails were brittle. My husband was like going to take me to the emergency room just because I put a bit of pepper on my food. I mean, it was bad. Now, this was 6 years ago, and I'm still on the battle to get better. I'm way better than I was, but this started 6 years ago. And the reason why I want to tell this story, the reason why I had to give the context is in the battle of trying to get better, I always thought I had to be strong and I had to be strong in front of other people. And so me being strong in front of other people, I'm in the middle of this photo shoot, and all of a sudden I get excruciating gut pain. And that's what would happen. 1 minute I'd be fine, and then I'd be on my knees gasping for air. So I'm in the middle of a photo shoot. I'm clutching my stomach. I excuse myself. I didn't want to tell them why. And so I go upstairs. And the other part of me that always leans on my husband, I grab my phone. I'm like on the floor. I'm like, oh my God, I need my husband. I need him to get me up because I don't want people to know that I'm sick downstairs. So I need him to get me up. And so in that moment, I grabbed my phone and I call him. Now, me and my husband have a 3-ring rule because we're business partners as well. So in order to know when his wife is calling him, it's the 3 rings. So if I call you on the first call and you're in the middle of a meeting, you can ignore me. If I call you on the second time, you can ignore me. If I call you the third time, that means your wife needs you. And no matter what you're doing, whoever you're with, if you're interviewing the president of the United States, you got to say, sorry, my wife's calling me 3 times. So me and my husband have been in business for a long time. We've been together for 20 years. So having these rules are very important. So you can imagine, Molly, I'm on the floor, I'm clutching my stomach. I'm like, okay, I have the 3-ring rule. So after the 3 rings, he doesn't answer. And so now, as I'm saying, I need my husband, I need my husband, I need my husband. I'm like, how the hell am I going to get off the floor because he's not answering? And in that moment, I realized, you don't need your husband. You want him, but you don't need him. Lisa, you are your own hero. Get the F up and show yourself what you're freaking made of. And girl, I got up. I took a deep breath. I said, you want him. You don't need him. You are the hero of your own life. And in that moment, I flipped. Like my mindset just flipped. I went downstairs. I finished off the photo shoot. At the end of the day, my husband came running to me going, oh my God, I just saw you missed 3 calls. And I was like, babe, I got this. And from that day forward, I shifted the way I thought. I shifted the ownership in everything that I do. In that if I'm on the floor, Lisa, stop waiting for someone else to come save you. You are your own hero. Take ownership and get up. And that mentality of the taking ownership made me realize what I had done, my health, was actually all on me. It was actually all my fault. Now, thought can be triggering for a lot of people. So I use it because it motivates me, but I think people need to use ownership, responsibility, whatever the language. But when I say this was the biggest mindset shift of my life that changed everything of how I showed up in my relationship with my husband, how I show up in my business, how I show up as a friend, because I take ownership over everything. That who you see today is a massive shift from who I was 6 years ago. And that initial thing came from me believing and realizing I am my own hero.
Hi again, it's Molly. I hope you're enjoying the show. If you're a go-getter who wants to conquer overwhelm and sharpen your focus, I want to let you know about my new free webinar training, Purposeful Productivity. This free webinar gives you a framework to unlock more energy for what matters most and to finally beat burnout. Head over to mollyfletcher.com/webinar to access this free training and my new life-changing energy management framework. That's mollyfletcher.com/webinar. Lisa, I wrote a book called The Energy Clock because I think we have to look at our lives through the lens of energy, right? In other words, so we have to fill our own cup first because we can't pour from an empty cup. How do you do this tactically, right? So in other words, we hear this, take care of ourselves. I believe we have to pull back and say, what gives us energy? What fills us up? Whatever that might be. And we have to protect that time and make sure that we honor that every day. Because if we don't decide where our energy goes, the world will decide for us. And I think we're in
God.
Yeah. I mean, and we're in such an interesting time right now where so many people's demand is exceeding their capacity. And over a long period of time, at some level, that's potentially where you found yourself was your demand was so high, you were enjoying it at some level because of the external accolades. But then at some level, over a long period of time, that's not sustainable, right? And so your health snapped. How do you do this tactically now moving forward? Because we live in a world where I think there are so many people who are burned out, who are exhausted, whose level of demand is exceeding their level of capacity. And it's showing up as a compromise, often starting with themselves.
Oh my God, it's so true, Molly, and it's such a powerful question. For me, it was creativity. So I just looked at what the thing I had stopped doing that made my heart sing. And I had stopped drawing. For 10 years, I didn't pick up a pencil. And I thought, because I was like, I haven't got time for that. Picking up the pencil won't make the company more successful. Picking up the pencil actually won't make my relationship with my husband. I thought wouldn't make my relationship with my husband more successful. And so the thing that made my heart sing, I stopped doing. Now, look, if someone may not know what that is yet, someone may be listening to this and is like, okay, well, you had something that you could go back to and say, what was the thing I stopped doing? But what if people don't necessarily have that? I think the very first key is to give yourself the grace to experiment. But in doing this, you have to know why you're doing it. So you have to say, in order to have a better relationship with my partner, I have to show up as my best self. To have a better business, I have to show up, right? So the why piece has to be so strong that when you find that like uncomfortableness where you become, because you're the people pleaser and you're making this slight change, you feel that uncomfortableness. So you need to have your why that you can keep going back to be like, okay, like this feels really selfish, but I remember my why. Or, but this makes me feel uncomfortable because I'm asking for something that other people are looking at me like, I can't believe that you want time but be up by yourself. You have to keep going back to that why that has to be so strong. So having your why, locking that in, and then taking time, I call it, and me and my husband, we call this, the name is play the game of what is your selfish desire. Now, we've played this game, and me and my husband, for the last 20 years, because I used to hear the phrase, a happy wife is a happy life. And that mortifies me, Molly. It breaks my heart. And the reason why is because really someone is saying, it doesn't matter if I'm happy. It doesn't matter what I want. As long as my wife is happy, I'm content. That's not actually true. It needs to be happiness on both sides. Then you can both bring this true, beautiful happiness together. But if one person always feels like they're sacrificing for someone else, it will eventually create contempt and resentment. And so me and my husband, we play the game, selfish desire, what would you like? Now, for people right now, I want them to play that. This means you're not thinking about anyone else. This means you don't care about your kids. You don't care about your partner. You don't care about your business. Just right now, if you had 30, even start with 30 minutes. I do a whole day.
Yeah.
I do a whole day of selfish desire, just so you know.
And you do it all in one day, you identify, or you sit all day and you identify.
So I now have gotten to the point where over these last 6 years since my health, it's been an evolution. So people may not be able to take a whole day, but I do a whole day of just self-care. I switch my phone off. I tell my family, hey, so you know, you can't reach me. I tell everyone in my company, you can't reach me on Saturdays. And if anyone, even a business opportunity comes along, I usually say no. Because I'm like, Saturday's my self-care day.
You do this every Saturday, once a week. You have a full day.
Every Saturday, I have a full day. So I start in the morning and normally play this selfish desire game with my husband in the morning. Now, if people are starting small, I would just say, take an hour, 30 minutes of your day. And just say, can you do that on a Saturday? Can you do it on a Sunday? In fact, I want everyone right now to take 1 hour and tell their friends, tell their family, tell their partners, tell their kids, come up with a plan and say, for this hour, I'm just going to switch my phone off. And now what I want them to do is just write down what sounds like fun. And now it's not for anyone else. And so for me, it was drawing. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to draw. And so my husband, if you're doing it with your partner, he would say what his selfish desire is. And normally it's like watching anime or reading manga, or he loves business. And so he doesn't need to switch off as much as I do. And so he says like, oh, I want to write something.
Yeah.
And so I go, cool. I've got my selfish desire over here. You got your selfish desire over here. Babe, let's do it at 10 a.m. You go off and do your thing. I'm going to go off and do my thing. No one can interrupt me. And then we're going to come back together at 12 o'clock and we're going to eat lunch together. All right, great. That sounds great. So now there's no resentment. I've done my thing. He's done his thing because we're very busy at work. And so this becomes our little selfish self-care. Then we come together usually around 12 o'clock on a Saturday and we eat lunch together. And then we end up spending the next 5 hours together and we play the same thing about movie or a TV show. It's like, what do you selfishly want to watch? And he may say something that's sci-fi. And I'm like, that sounds horrendous. So I don't want to watch that. And so what we'll do is then we'll pick the thing we want to watch together. And then afterwards we'll separate and he goes watch his sci-fi thing and I go watch my thing. And we cultivate the day. And we say, what are those things that are going to make my heart sing? So to get very tactical and precise is allow yourself the space, if you don't know what that is, to play. Now, make a plan, tell people, and actually switch your phone off.
See, that's the trick.
And the boundary. Molly, the boundary on everyone, literally, you have no idea how many people pushed back. But because I knew my why, I was like, okay, Lisa, in not taking self-care, you've seen where it gets you. There's no negotiating yourself out of it. You've actually seen where it gets you. You've seen that by not taking self-care, it will actually damage your health. And how do you feel now that you damage your health? I can't show up for my business. I can't show up for my relationship. I have zero energy, Molly. I just about had energy to get up that morning. So in going back to my why and understanding why my self-care was important, I was able to confidently set the boundary, but it wasn't easy. And so when I say radically confident actually in setting that boundary, and so that meant telling the people in your life how you're going to show up, telling yourself why you're doing it. So if you get pushback, you realign with your why. And then the last piece is no, not everyone's going to support it and not everyone's going to agree.
You've gotten intentional, you've gotten clear, you've done all those things. But the other thing that I think is a word that's important to mention is discipline. What you're doing takes a ton of discipline, and it takes the courage to hit the no button, which a lot of people, we have a hard time with, I think women in particular. But the no button is key to be able to do what you're doing and what you're describing. It's massive. All right, you got to get me inside of Impact Theory Studios, how it came about. I mean, how you built your audience. I mean, all of it. It's good stuff.
Thank you, girl. Well, it really came from Quest growing, being so incredible, really changing people's lives. And then me looking at my mother and being like, I'm wealthier than I've ever been. I'm more successful than I've ever been. And here my mum is still extremely overweight. And I was, trying to be like, oh, maybe she just needs a dietitian. Mum, now I've got the money, I can hire a dietitian for you. Maybe she just needs a personal trainer. Mum, I've got enough money now, I can hire a personal trainer. And every time I would say to her, all of these things, she would just say, no, I'm too old. I can't. I'm too old. I can't. And me and my husband, what we realized, having the background of filmmaking, right? If you remember, that's where I started from. We wanted to make movies. Our background was still content creation. And so realizing that Quest bars were absolutely amazing for the people that had decided they were worth picking up a protein bar in the first place. But what about the people that are too depressed? They don't feel good enough about themselves to even think that they're worth it. What about the people that are too depressed, that can't even think about putting on sneakers to go and step into a gym? What about those people? And so here me and my husband were saying that we wanted to help people and we're at the height of our success and we're not actually helping people on a 360. And so what we started to do is we started to create content inside of the company. Now, Tom's business partners, they weren't necessarily aligned with the content creation side of things. They wanted to focus on the product. And so me and my husband just said, well, what's the point of success if you're not really fulfilling the life you want? And for me and my husband, it really was creating content. It was making sure that we really help people on the 360 and just not, partially. And so that was where we said, okay, let's just take the studio that we've built within the company. Let's just take the finances that we've, been successful, and let's just go and, put our money where our mouth is and create a studio. So we ended up building a studio in our house. We ended up just inviting people in. And I think that ended up being we didn't really mean to, but inviting people into your home allowed people to feel like they could resonate with you more. And so that's been for about 5 years. And then in that process, I was behind the scenes. So I was the one, if you've ever read Rocket Fuel, one of the most amazing books.
Oh yeah, I love that book.
Yeah. So my husband the whole time was the rocket and I was the fuel. I was behind the scenes. My crazy husband would have an idea. Let's build a set and let's build it in our house and let's have neon lights and let's have a crane. And so I'm like, cool, let's figure it out. So I was the one that would go get the freaking crane and the sets and have it built. And so that was our relationship. I loved it. But more and more people were saying, Lisa, we want to hear from you, because people were hearing about the health struggles I was going through. People didn't realize, oh my God, Tom is actually working with her business partner. Hang on a minute, she was a housewife. So more and more people were asking about my story. And this is where, again, it goes into, who the hell do I think? I haven't got the nerves to step in front of the camera. Are you joking? Why on earth would I ever step in front of the camera? And so the negative mindset, the voice of telling me, who do you think you are? No one's going to listen to you, Lisa. You're the supportive person in this relationship, in this business. You're not an on-camera personality. And in that, every time, almost like this is the repeated lesson, right, in this interview, is in those moments, I would say, what's more important, the ego or the goal? And so I said, all right, we've put our money where our mouth is to create impact. I've just built a massive studio in my house. And yet I'm saying that my ego is more important than getting in front of the camera. And so I just said, all right, I reminded myself it's just the insecure Lisa that shows up again, and that's okay. But I don't get to listen to her. I don't get her to stop me from moving forward. So negative mindset, fear of everything. How on earth am I going to keep getting in front of the camera? And that's where I then became radically confident again. I put a plan in place and I said, all right, first of all, you're going to do it with your husband because he's your safety net. He's so good in front of the camera that if you fail, Lisa, he's got your back. Second of all, everyone wanted me back then it was Facebook Lives. And I was like, I'm just not going to do live. The idea of it being live is petrifying. So I was like, forget the live. Like, we're just going to pre-record it. So I had a game plan. And then it was just press record. Then the last piece is the great news is, Lisa, this never has to see the light of day. You are right now being the Daniel-san in Karate Kid. And what you're doing now is you're waxing on, you're waxing off. You're getting prepared. You're practicing. And so that's what I ended up doing. I ended up practicing. We released it. We cut the hell out of it if I was nervous. Like, we then did another one. We then did a live together. We then did another live together. I then tried it by myself, right? And it became the wax on, wax off. So that who you see today, right now, is the person that's just put in so much time and practice to get so good.
How do people get the book?
They can go to radicalconfidence.com. I've got a bunch of bonuses over there. I think they're up for another couple of weeks. But you get like a free course in there. And it's just like, I'm always trying to say, what is actually going to move the needle on impact? And so that's, again, my North Star. In case you didn't realize, I haven't said it like 30,000 times in this interview.
It's so good though.
Thank you, girl. So you can go to radicalconfidence.com or really anywhere books are sold. But if you go over to the website, you can then get all the bonuses as well. I do my own Audible. So, I definitely did it in my spirit and all the nuances of my accent. And it had to be me. And so I would love for your audience, like, if they get the book, if they read it, or if they listen to this podcast, to like tag us, let us know what resonated. Again, I'm the learner. So having this feedback is very important to me to know how I show up tomorrow, next week, next year.
So we end with rapid fire. You've been incredibly generous with your time, Lisa. I'm going to hit you with some quick ones and you just tell me what comes up, all right?
All right, let's do it.
Book you recommend most often?
Captivate by Vanessa Van Edwards.
One habit that's improved your life?
Not setting an alarm to wake up.
That's awesome. Worst advice you've ever received?
2, actually. 1 is, who the hell, the world needs another protein bar like they need another hole in the head. When we wanted to sell Quest, that was from experts. And then cut 2, become number 1 selling bar in the entire country, end up changing the whole protein bar demographic in stores. We actually had the vitamin shop saying it was a dying category. And your company revived the entire category. And then the second piece of terrible advice I got was from my dad, which was not to marry my husband because our cultural differences won't work out.
And look at you guys, 20 years. I love it.
About to spend 20 years. And look, my dad always loved my husband. It was just he didn't understand or believe that living different cultures, coming from completely different backgrounds would ever work. And me moving away from my family, it would never work.
One thing you wish you knew earlier in your career?
Who you are today does not in any way, shape, or form dictate the person you can become.
What is something people often get wrong about you?
That I'm confident. In every aspect, I've trained my confidence. And so I've got confident in certain areas, but that I'm just confident, period. It's not like you have brown hair and until you change your hair, you have it, right? It's ebbs and flows.
What would you say is your superpower?
It is taking the negative voice that used to be my kryptonite and making her my best friend, because she would stop me. She was telling me how bad I was, that I wasn't good enough. And what I realized is that she's kind of like your best friend, where she sees that you're not acting in accordance to what you say you want in life. And so when she says things like, hey, you're going to bomb in front of the camera, she's actually just trying to warn me, you don't know how to be in front of the camera, so you better get good. And so in order for me to take that voice, I was able to take the critic in my head and I've made her my coach.
So the show is called Game Changers. So one last question. What game changer, I kind of think I know where you might go with this, inspires you and why?
Oprah Winfrey.
Yes.
Who did you think I was going to say out of curiosity?
Your husband.
I know. So yes, but here's why with Oprah. She's a female. She started as a host. People didn't believe in her. She went on to be her own freaking hero. She chose not to have children because of the value she wants to bring to the world. I'm the same. I chose not to have children. She took being a host and built a freaking empire. She empowers women every single day, and she doesn't use excuses on why she isn't creating greatness. She just keeps going. So yeah, Oprah, I gotta say, my girl O.
I love it. No, she's remarkable, no question about it. Lisa, this was super fun. Thanks for your energy. Thanks for your info. This was powerful. This is going to help a lot of people. It's going to make an impact. I love it. Thank you.
Thanks, Molly. Appreciate it, homie.
Wow, that was a great one. Here's a couple of my favorite takeaways, a couple of things that really bubbled up for me inside of this conversation. Number one, be the hero of your own story. Lisa's story is such a powerful illustration of what happens when we stop living life on autopilot and we start taking ownership of our own journey. So good, right? Unfortunately, so often in life, we find ourselves on autopilot, don't we? But we've got to pull back. We've got to take ownership. We've only got one of these life things, friends. Number two, failing doesn't mean that you are a failure. Huge difference. I love this distinction, right? Next time you face a setback, remember, every time you fail, it means you showed up and you tried. Failure is a wonderful thing. It's where we learn and grow. And I think at some level, our society has a low failure tolerance. We have to increase our tolerance for failure and recognize that it's an opportunity for growth. Number three, confidence is a byproduct of taking action. In other words, confidence isn't the goal. It's the tool and the fuel you need to get to the end result. It's built along the way through action. We have to take action in our lives to build confidence, right? We can't think our way into confidence. We have to take action. Remember that. We build it along the way through action. So good. Great conversation today. Thanks, as always, for listening to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. There you can listen to previous episodes and leave us a review, which helps other people find out about the show. This episode was edited and sound designed by the team at Sound On Studios. You can find out more about their work at soundonsoundoff.com. Check it out. For more about me, visit mollyfletcher.com. Until next time, stay curious and be bold.